We are in the R season, or we could call it R chapter. It has a special place in the phonology of every language. And even when we're talking about R, we don't know what we're talking about because we have this concept of rhotic, but depending on what language you're speaking, or in the phonology of what language you are, R could be a bunch of stuff. We have examined so far the alveolar R. It could be either trill or tap or flap, or it could be approximant. Then we went all the way to French, where we have the uvular R. Even the fact that you have a particular sound which is perceived to be R, but it's all over the place in the consonant chart, is itself something very interesting. So how could the same sound like R be alveolar, at the same time it go all the way back and become uvular, and still be perceived as R? Because when they use the alphabet to write it, they use the same symbol, which is R. And now we're going to look at it in the context of the German language. In German, R has several allophones. When I say German, I don't mean necessarily Standard German. Standard German is called High German or Hochdeutsch. It could be a regional dialect. I put in between slashes the phoneme, and then in between square brackets, I have the different allophones of R in German. Depending on the phonological environment, you would pronounce each of these differently. So I'm going to get back to this. The first two allophones of R in German are exactly the same as those in French. Voiced uvular fricative. It may be pronounced like a uvular trill. The word schwere in German means difficult.
Ja, schwere.
It's not actually schwere, it's schwer. Depending on the case, the ending of the word changes. The endings change based on gender, case, and number. So here the R, it is intervocalic. So what do you think, based on what we have done so far, do you think an intervocalic R is likely to be the uvular trill, or is it likely to be the uvular fricative? Generally speaking, intervocalic sounds tend to be spirantized, it means fricativized. I don't know if you know the word lenition. In languages in general, there is a tendency for lenition. It means we gradually tend to pronounce things with less energy. Basically, it takes more energy to pronounce a plosive than a fricative. So it's like we try to streamline language. So here, when she's pronouncing schwere, here the R, which is intervocalic, it is the upside down R. How do you pronounce the voiced uvular trill?
So, first of all, your tongue has to go back. Yeah, you pull your tongue a little bit back. Then you relax your tongue, you relax it, and then you let air out. Okay, so
So it's at the far end, it's all the way far back in the mouth, at the uvula. You see uvula here? And then if it's plosive, you pronounce it plosively. It means there's full constriction and there is a sudden release of air. And then you vibrate your vocal folds, you get the voice uvular trill. So the word rot in German, so it's R, rot.
Rot.
So we are having the voice uvular trill. Technically it's not a trill because if you can pronounce it continuously, it's a fricative. Depends how you pronounce it. So the gargling technique that French speakers use to teach their R, the uvular R, can be used to teach the uvular R in German as well, because basically it's the same sound. It's again, same place of articulation, same manner of articulation, and it is voiced.
This is something they recommend usually. You take some water, ja, ein bisschen Wasser, und du trinkst das, you drink it. Yeah, and then you gargle it.
Again, why is it gargling? Because when you gargle, you keep the water in your mouth by blocking the end of your mouth. So basically water is touching your uvula. So when you talk about uvula, so you know that we said when you want to articulate the sound, you need two articulators, right? So we have a passive articulator and an active articulator. So when you say a uvular sound, the uvula is the passive articulator. What is the active articulator, which we don't mention usually, is the tongue. So if you do that, basically you can gargle because you can keep water in your mouth. Stören means to disturb.
Dann stören, stören.
Schreiben means to write. You can try to repeat after you hear the word.
Schreiben, schreiben.
Sprechen.
Sprechen, sprechen.
This sound, you see, the voiceless version of the fricative sound is also an allophone of this particular sound. Now what she's doing is she's pronouncing the voiceless uvular fricative. So basically the voiceless version of the fricative one,
Sprechen.
it can alternate with the voiced version. She can optionally devoice the uvular fricative. You see, if you look at the chart, interestingly, all trills are voiced. There's no voiceless trill in any language. Do you think it's possible to have a voiceless trill? The sounds that are impossible to have theoretically are shaded in gray in the chart. So if it's empty but it's not gray, it's theoretically possible, but it has not been recorded in any language yet. But interestingly, for the fricative, all fricatives have both voiced and voiceless versions. The fricative row of the chart is full from bilabial to glottal. It's like there is no empty place. Why is it so? Because probably the easiest, also distinct enough sounds that can be pronounced. So far, I explained these three symbols. The voiced fricative uvular, the voiceless fricative uvular being used optionally instead of each other, can be the voiced uvular trill. But then in German, there is a variety of R, which is actually a vowel. Lowered, open, mid, central vowel. In positions similar to where in non-rhotic English you drop the R, it can be pronounced as a vowel. When it's at the end of a word or at the end of a syllable, this vowel version of it may be used. So for example, the word arbeiten, excuse my bad pronunciation if you're a native speaker of German or know German better than me. Arbeiten means to work, but then Arbeiter means worker. For example, the word hot, which means hard, or the word for ear, Ohr. But you should keep in mind that when in German you want to enunciate the word, which means you want to pronounce it very carefully, you can replace that vowel with the fricative. So it's more likely to use the vowel version of it, the vowel allophone, if it's at the end of the word. If it's pre-consonantal, it's likely to use the fricative one, not the vowel.
Wir versuchen, unser Deutsch zu verbessern.
Look what she's doing. She writes a sentence. She's replacing the trill with the vowel. So instead of saying, wir versuchen, unser Deutsch zu verbessern, she says, wir versuchen, unser Deutsch zu verbessern.
Wir versuchen, unser Deutsch zu verbessern.
What she does is she pronounces every single R as a trill, as if the trill R is the best enunciated pronunciation of R. Now she will do the standard German.
Richtig klingt es aber so. Wir versuchen, unser Deutsch zu verbessern.
This is a good example of how you can put the vowel. And then you have the trill R. In regional dialects, it may be pronounced like the R in Spanish or Italian, which is a voiced alveolar trill. There is a region in Germany called Bavaria, the Bavarian R. This is a funny guy. He's a German guy who speaks English. What he does is he speaks English with a Bavarian accent.
We are so glad to see so many of you lovely people here tonight, and we would especially like to welcome all the representatives of the Illinois law enforcement community who have chosen to join us here in the Palace Hotel ballroom at this time.
So now let's move on to a real German. This is an actual video of the Bavarian accent with R.
Ich wohne in Rosenheim, das ist in der Nähe von München, beziehungsweise zwischen München und Rosenheim. Bayerisch rede ich trotzdem noch. Ich bin aufgewachsen in Groß-Karolinenfeld, das ist in der Nähe von Rosenheim.
So the previous video was about R in French. As you can see, the R in German has these 5 allophones. So if you want to compare it to French, in French, the R only has 2 of these, typically. Obviously, we didn't have the vowel version, but we had the trill version in the French spoken in Africa. We don't have the vowel version. The other allophones are apparently all of them shared, especially the voiced ones.